I am extremely excited because we have come to the final chapter before we get building our first official website. And I'm also excited because this chapter in particular, is also very awesome. So we have looked at flows before, which was a way we could align and put out our layout the way we want. But we saw how cumbersome it was and how limiting it was. So now I'm going to introduce you to something awesome called Flexbox. And Flexbox allows us to create these awesome responsive layouts in an extremely simple, super way. So let's get started. All I'm going to do is just create a container div here, and I'm going to add a few boxes. All right, so let's do a few boxes here. Box 1, box 2, and box 3. After we're going to do this chapter on Flexbox, I'm actually going to show you a practical example of creating a layout. So that's going to come up in the next chapter. And then I'm going to also give you a challenge for you to do another one. So let's actually create like 6 here. So let me copy this three more times here, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just go to the CSS and I'm going to add some basic styling. So first of all, I'm going to remove the margins on all the elements, add a padding of 0 and a box sizing of border box. Okay, now what we can also do, if I want to particularly style only these divs, I can also add another class of box like this. So now I can apply specific styles only to this box, box, and box, and hit save. Okay, super. So what we can do, let's also add a H1 in here. Oh, okay. Let's make this easy to see, all right? Just to make everything very visible. All right, we're also gonna have to rename these. I should have done this beforehand, but I thought I'd show you because I like starting everything from scratch, because when I was learning, I found it very difficult when people would jump in to a lot of code. It's like, oh, okay, this is our code, let's move on, let's go here. Like, whoa, hold up. I want to see what you wrote. So this is what we have, a container with divs and H1s inside of them. So right now, if we take a look here, this is what we have. Okay, so I'm gonna select all the boxes and I'm just gonna add a height and width to them. So let's do 10 rem to this, and let's do width of 10 rem. All right, I'm gonna set something fixed for now. Okay, and let's also grab each one and just add a background color to all of them. And one final thing I'm gonna do is actually wrap everything. So I'm gonna add a border to this container so we can see exactly where our content is. So there we go. So as you can see by default, if we add these divs, it's gonna be display style block, which means that all of our content is gonna stretch all the way here. So there's gonna be empty space here, and they're gonna jump to another row. So all the way down here. So with Flexbox, we can change this behavior in a lot of awesome, cool ways. So let's take a look. The first property is on the parent. So what I'm going to show you basically is all the properties that you can add to the parent container, which is going to affect all the children inside. Okay. And then after, we are going to take a look at the child attributes that we can use as long as the container has a display property of flex. All right, so for now, we're just gonna take a look at the parent. So where this big border is, adding styles to that and how it's gonna affect the underlying divs inside. So let's take a look on this container. If I add a display flex, all of my content is automatically gonna jump one next to another like that. Okay, now here's the cool part. By default, this has a flex direction. So here's another property. This has a flex direction property of row. So they come one next to each other. Now here's the strength of Flexbox. I can modify this the way I want. If I want, I can do row reverse, and that's gonna flip everything over. Take a look at that, how cool. We can also change this to column if we want. So again, the standard, the way we had it before, or we can also do column reverse, which is gonna again switch everything over. Awesome. So let's change this back actually to the normal behavior. And by doing that, we can just remove this. Now what happens when we decrease the size of this? So as you can see, all the content actually gets kind of squished there, right? Okay, but what if I want this to wrap? So what if I don't have enough space here anymore, I want this to jump over here, right? I don't want this to get way small like this. So as soon as I'm out of space, make a jump. Well, there's a property called flex wrap, and by default, this is set to no wrap. However, if I add wrap, take a look, as soon as it's out of space, the content starts wrapping around, which makes for responsive web design super easy. There we go. We can also reverse this behavior by adding wrap reverse, and that's gonna kind of just do the exact opposite. And there we go. All right, there we go. Let's remove this for now because I want to show you a lot of other cool things. Let's increase the size of this a bit like that. There's another property that's gonna affect the children, which is called justify content. All right, and this is gonna affect all of them horizontally. So if I add center here, all of my content is going to be placed in the center. I can add flex start, which is going to put it at the beginning, which is the default, and flex end is going to put it in the end. Okay, very cool. Now, let me show you something. If I add a height to this, so I'm going to add a fixed height of 50 VH just to make this larger. I can move this back around. Let's do justify content center. Right, just like that. I can also align this vertically, perfectly, the way I want. I can do align items for this, and I can say center, and take a look. We have aligned horizontally and vertically super easily. We can also do end, flex end, and that's gonna put it at the end. Cool. Let's move this back to the center. There's another one called space around, like this. If I hit save, this is going to leave space at the beginning here, at the end as well. But the space is not equal here between the actual, so the space here at the beginning of the border is not equal with the space with the elements, with the divs here. So this is larger than the space it leaves here. If we want equal spaces here and in the middle, we can add space evenly. So there's a lot of flexibility that you have with justify content, which makes it super, super awesome. Now with the align items, you can have flex start, flex end, center that we saw. And we also have one called stretch. All right, and if we hit save, nothing's gonna happen because we have a set height on the box. But if I remove this, as you can see, it stretches automatically all the way down. So if I increase the height of this container, it starts growing. However, if I change the align items to center or something, then it's gonna shrink all the way to the size of the text that we have here. All right, so that's pretty cool. There's another one that's called baseline, which kind of just centers all the text that you have in here. So it makes sure that every text that you have is on the same line, okay? But that is the difference. If you don't have a height on it, by default, it's gonna stretch out automatically, okay? So if you don't have a height on the box, it's gonna stretch out automatically. But if you add center or flex start or flex end, it's gonna shrink down to the size of the text that we have here inside. Okay, very cool. Now, what happens if we change the direction? And what I mean by that is, let's remove everything. Let me add back the height here. Okay, and let's remove everything. What happens if, I don't want to remove the height of the box like that. Actually, you know what? It's fine, because what I want to do is say flex direction column. Like that, okay? So as you can see, even now, it kind of shrinks like that, okay? And we can still apply things like flex wrap, we can say wrap, and that's gonna work just fine. So it works in every direction that you want. Okay? But I don't want this to happen. I just want to show you, because this is very important and it gets confusing to a lot of people, is that once you change the flex direction to column, the align items and the justify content switch over basically. All right, so we use justify content to basically align everything horizontally. Now we use justify content to align everything vertically. So as soon as you switch over the flex direction, these two properties, the align items and the justify content, switch places. So now if I add align item center, it's actually gonna do it horizontally like this. And let's switch over to this view, then it's gonna do it vertically. All right, so if you have column, it's gonna do it horizontally, and if you have row, it's gonna do it vertically. All right, and same goes for the justify content. So I can see flex start, but the problem is that there's no space here. So let's actually make these a bit smaller. Let's change it to 5 and 5, and we'll increase this to 100. So our box is a bit bigger. Okay, so now you can see it a bit easier. If we add align item center, it's gonna do it horizontally. And the flex start, so justify content changes to the vertical line. So if I add center here, oops, let me remove flex, it's just center. We don't have to add flex, it goes there. So now we can apply vertically the space around or space in between. So you have all the flexibility in the world. You can align everything the way you want. Let's do space between, hit save, and there we go. Now we don't have any spaces empty here. So again, let me remove this just real quick so you can see the difference. So as you can see, these two things switch around. Okay, let's go back to center. That's completely fine. And lastly, what I want to show you is align content. But for that, we need multiple rows here. So I'm going to change this back to 50%, so make it a bit smaller. I'm going to remove the flex direction column, again, just to kind of simplify everything here. And I'm going to add a bigger height and width to this, so 20, all right? Actually, let's do more. Let's do 30. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come here and add a flex wrap and say wrap. All right, so as you can see, our content starts wrapping. So whenever you have a situation like this, where your content wraps and you want to align these, you can also do something called align content. And this is basically going to take everything here and it's going to position it in a certain way. Let me make this a bit bigger again. Height 80, all right, like that. So align content, we can do flex start. There we go, that's gonna put it at the beginning. If we add center, that's gonna drop all the content in the center. We can also do space between and all of those other lovely things. So as you can see, space between and space around. That's gonna give space around. And did I miss anyone? Okay, there's one called stretch. So let's do stretch. Stretch. How do you write stretch? But then again, for this one, you might need to remove these. I misspelled this. Stretch. I don't know how to write stretch. Okay, so if we remove these are gonna stretch by default. Okay, so basically when you have content that's wrapping around, you can adjust the way you want these to be wrapped around. That's why you would use align content. So let's just say flex start for now and start. Let's do start like that and see how that behaves. So as you can see, it just wraps at the beginning. If we do end, let's kind of mess around with this. Then it starts wrapping down there. Okay, very cool. So those are all the properties that you can use on the parent. Let's switch this back to 10, make them small again, and let's remove everything here and just have it simple like this. Okay? So now the content basically, there's nothing really happening. Okay? So next up, what I want to take a look at the properties that you can apply to each item. And this is where Flexbox gets really fun. You can imagine that this is your header, maybe this is a section on your page, this is another section on your page, and you finish your website and you're like, oh no, I wanted this section to actually be here. So to give you a practical example, on these websites, we have this section and we have this section with the image gallery. So maybe I'm like, oh wait, I wanted this part of the page, so this section to be here and this one to be up here. So what would you have to do? Well, normally what you would do is you would go into your HTML and you would copy the thing over and you would paste it above. However, with Flexbox, everything becomes so awesome because you have something called order. As long as you have a parent that has display flex on it, you can come here and you can change the order of the items. You can add a order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to each of them. Order 2, order 3, order 4, order 5, and order 6. Okay? Let's say I want to switch out box 2 with box 5. So I would just go to box 2, change this to 5, and box 5, change it to 2. And then there we go. That's so easy. I want to change box 1 with box 6. I go to box 1 and change it to order 6, and this one to order 1. And there you go. So this is super powerful and very easy. At the end, if you want to modify or move things around, you can do that very simply in your CSS with Flexbox. All right, so let me get rid of everything in here like this. Perfect. Another one I'm going to show you is called Flex Grow. All right. And this is going to be an easy way that you can add a width to your little box here. So what I'm actually going to do is change the direction here to flex direction column like this. And I'll take a look if I go to one of these boxes and if I add a flex grow of 1 and hit save. Now you're not going to see anything. Actually, the direction here doesn't even matter unless I start removing a few boxes. So let me get rid of just leave 2 boxes. Okay. So what's going to happen if I add flex grow? Let's just add it to 1 box. Let's add it to this one. This is going to take up all the available space. So it kind of acts like the width, right? But it's going to take up all the available space as soon as it hits this box too. It cannot get any bigger than this because we have the text laying in here, as you can see, and this still is responsive. It still works nicely. But what if I want these to have equal widths? So maybe width 50, width 50. So what I can do is just add a flex grow of 1 on box 2 as well. And now it has equal space. But the cool thing now is maybe I want this box to be 2 times bigger than this box. So that way I can just change this to 2. So now this is 2 times larger than this. So if you take this space and this space, it's going to equal to 2 times larger. And you can do this as many times as you want. Take a look at that. And it's always going to stay responsive and it's super, super useful. Okay, by default, this is going to be set to 0. So you can actually remove the width from here and nothing's going to happen. So you can actually use flex grow to add the widths to your elements. Okay, one thing I want to show you, if you add a flex wrap to wrap, let's bring this down. See, this is not going to wrap if you add this flex grow. Now, rather than using width or things of that sort, we saw that we can add flex grow, but to add a base size to these elements. So if you don't have, maybe you don't want that flex grow actually grows it to have all the available space in here, right? If we add a flex grow to all the boxes, so flex grow, and I add 1, the space is going to be all distributed equally. So if I change the size of this, as you can see, it doesn't even break. It goes to the max and it grows all equivalently. All right, and we saw that if we add 2 to this, this is gonna be 2 times bigger than the rest of these. Now let's do 3, so 3 times bigger than the rest of these. This is always gonna maintain its size like this. Okay, but what if I wanna add maybe just a base width to them? We can do something called Flex Basis. And here, rather than, again, adding a width of 20 rem or a percentage, we can add a Flex Basis. And in here, we can say something like 10, all right? But we can still add Flex Grow if we want to this. So you remember that when we added Flex Wrap, and we just added a normal Flex Grow of 1, we could not make this jump to another line. As you can see, it just doesn't jump to another line. We can still have that functionality as long as we have a Flex Basis. So if I add a Flex Basis to this of something like 30 rem, maybe I want this, well, let me do something smaller because I'm gonna ruin the surprise here. Let's do 5. Let's do even, okay, never mind. Okay, that's good. So 5 is good. So this still takes up the whole space here. But as soon as I make this smaller and these elements are gonna become smaller than 5 rem, the Flex Wrap is gonna go into effect, which is very nice because as soon as it gets smaller than 5 rem, okay, it's too small. I cannot get the screen that small. So let's do 10, let's do 20. Nah, I spoiled the fun again. No, no, 13. Okay, let's do 10. So as soon as this gets smaller than 10 rem, this last box is gonna jump down here. And the nice thing is that it's gonna get that Flex Grow 1, so it's gonna stretch out. Okay, so let's take a look. Boom, boom, boom. So look how nice this is. You can get some super nice responsive design. Maybe I want this to have a 2-column layout. So I can just increase the Flex Basis here and take a look. Now we have a 2-column layout. As soon as we get smaller, this is gonna keep splitting up till we arrive to a 1-column layout. How cool is that? So you can still create some awesome things, but remember, if you don't have a Flex Basis, this is just always gonna be stuck like this, right? It's always gonna just have this Flex Grow of 1 because it doesn't know when to drop to another line. We haven't defined a basis, a size for this box. But if we have a size like 20 rem, it's gonna know when it should jump down below because it's always gonna keep that 20. It's never gonna get smaller than that 20, but it can always get bigger just because we have that Flex Grow. A last quick one, which is called Flex Shrink. Now Flex Shrink by default has a 1 on it, okay? So everything shrinks normally like this. However, if I change 1, let's say box 2, I add a Flex Shrink of 0, this box will not have the ability to shrink anymore. So as you can see, if I go down like this box will always have the same Flex Basis that we provided up here, which is 10 rem. So it's never gonna shrink more than that. So actually how we use these usually is in combination. So you would use Flex Basis, you would use Flex Shrink, and Flex Grow as well. And actually what is recommended for you to do is to use the ones that you want and let the other ones on auto, and Flexbox is gonna figure it out on its own, which is very cool. So maybe I just wanna have this so it has a Flex Basis of, I don't know, like 20 rem, and then it grows. So when it drops to a new line, it just grows nicely. Okay, so what we can do is we can remove everything here, text align. I don't know why I added a text align there. We just have this, let's remove this as well. So we are back from the start, okay? What I can do is go on all the boxes and I can just say flex. The first one is gonna be grow, the second one is gonna be shrink, and the last one is gonna be the basis, okay? And by default, this is automatically 1 anyway. So let's save this and see if this works. So we should be able to, we need to add flex wrap and add a wrap. Okay, so it still works the same way. But the nice thing is that we can just use 1 here. You can change it like this. So now everything still works perfectly fine. Okay, so let me show you a few more properties that we can use here very quickly. I'm gonna remove everything from here so we are back to these gorgeous looking boxes. And I'm gonna add a height to this container. So I'm gonna add a 50 VH. Okay, so what we can do is maybe I just want to move these individually. So we can do that as well. If we are in flex direction row, which we are now, we can add an align self. So I can go to box 2 maybe, and I can add an align self. And I can say center, and as you can see, that's going to move it down in the center. We can also add end. That's going to move it to the end, or start. Excuse me, I need to add flex end. There we go. And flex start. It's going to move it back up to its initial position. Okay, so I changed the direction of these boxes. And what I'm going to do now is go up here and I'm just going to add an align. Let's add a align items center. Maybe I want to center these. Okay, perfect. We have them centered, but even like this, I can still move them around. If I add an align self, I can do flex end or flex start. So I can still move these independently on their own. So this is a very cool property because there are some cases where sometimes you just want to move one element in a specific direction. And with this, you can do that. All right, so now we know Flexbox. Let's take a look at a real site example and how we can implement it.